6% 10 years from now, a huge increase. In 2040, we project it will be 45%. This is where Japan is right now. Now, obviously, with this kind of outlook, the retired people or the people who are about to retire have the right to be concerned that who is going to pay for my pensions, right? Because the ratio of retired people to working age people is rising so fast. And with that in mind, they are saving more because they do not believe that the government will have the resources to fund the pension system. So this demographic trend is the primary reason why the savings rate in China is rising, which in turn is the primary reason why consumption as a share of Chinese GDP is declining, and why it's difficult for China to rebalance its economy towards consumption-driven growth. So this was China, the country where incomes are rising fast, and yet it's not reviving consumption. How about the rest of Asia? A very different picture. Incomes in the rest of Asia are not rising too fast. That's very interesting because we know that Asia is such an economic powerhouse, that we are exporting so much to the rest of the world. And yet, when you look at income statistics, it looks pretty bleak. Korea, for example, green are nominal incomes. They are rising, okay, 5% per year, but inflation is eating out most of it. On average, in the past 6 years, real incomes have been rising at about 1.5%. Not a lot, right? Not surprisingly, contribution to growth of private consumption, the stripes here, over the past 10 years in Korea hasn't been that big. Perhaps about 1.5 percentage points. Not a lot, right? And it's not a surprise. Incomes are not rising fast enough. Let's look at another one, Taiwan, a complete lack of earnings. In Taiwan, nominal earnings have been rising a little bit, but in real terms, the gray columns, yeah, they rebounded last year, but they dropped sharply the previous 2 years. On average, in the past 10 years, real earnings in Taiwan have declined. Not surprisingly, consumption has added maybe 1.5 percentage points to growth on average over the past 10 years. Very little. Another case, Thailand. That's a little bit better. The real disposable income, the gray columns again, have been rising at about 5% on average over the past 10 years. And as you can see, the contribution of consumption to growth, the stripes, was about 3 percentage points per year. So it tells us that when incomes do rise faster, consumption adds more to growth. Hong Kong, that's an interesting case. In real terms, wage growth has been negative over the past few years. People complain to your bosses. It's horrible what they are doing to us. Basically, less and less real income. And yet, private consumption has been contributing to growth on average about 2.5%, right? But we know that it's not us who are spending. It's the tourists, right? So that's the only reason why Hong Kong is actually at the top of the consumer league in Asia. Singapore, doing a little bit better. In Singapore, except for the crisis years, real growth in earnings has been pretty decent, over about 2 to 3% on average, and contribution of consumption to growth was also about 2.5%, on par with Thailand, close to the top of the Asian league. Philippines, another interesting case, minimum wages. That's the data we have. In real terms, in decline. However, consumption has been contributing more to growth in the Philippines than anywhere else in the region. Why? Remittances. So this shows that whenever there is enough income growth in Asia, the consumer can spend more. On the other hand, when incomes are not rising fast in real terms, the consumer is not spending. So to conclude, how to revive the Asian consumer? And what would be the implication for growth and inflation if the consumer does spend more? First, incomes need to rise faster. Not in China. In China, they're already rising fast enough. In India, by the way, as well. But everywhere else, you have to have faster growth of income. And that's something that is unlikely to happen soon because there's no new triggers versus the past 10 years to cause that. It's only that the population may be demanding through popular signs of dissent, dissatisfaction, that the government boosts their income, and that's the only hope. But this will take a long time. Inflation has to be brought under control so that it doesn't eat into those real incomes. And that will take a while. Inflation has yet to peak for the year. And savings ratios need to decline. Again, it will not happen soon. None of these three will happen soon, but especially this one will take a long time, especially in China, to convince people that their pensions are safe. So the Asian consumer will not wake up soon. Asian growth will not be driven by consumption for a while, for years to come. But in the end, sooner or later, it will happen. And when it does happen, regional growth will accelerate sharply. Instead of 8%, like I said, maybe 12% would be possible for emerging Asia. But price pressures would mount because food and housing account for the largest proportion of CPI baskets in the region. And this is what the less income-generating people will want to buy first. And price pressures would mount globally as well. So when the Asian consumer wakes up, we will have stronger growth in the region, but also much faster inflation, both here and globally. And this also means that interest rates will have to be higher here and globally. So the governments that are relying on borrowing to boost their revenue streams, especially the developed countries right now, would face much higher borrowing costs. And this would be really bad for them. So it's not in the interest of the developed world to see the Asian consumer reviving. To sum it up, the Asian consumer has a lot of potential because of the numbers and because of low level of consumption. But the potential is not being materialized because inflation is eating into real incomes and because in China, the pension system results in a high savings rate. In order to revive the Asian consumer, we need to change those trends. We have to have higher incomes, lower inflation, lower savings ratio. This will take years to materialize. When it does, we will see faster growth in the region, but also higher inflation, both in Asia and globally. Thank you very much.